This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, coming to you on Monday, March 11th, right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios and on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio. Hope you guys had a great weekend. It was beautiful in Lubbock, just a little chilly, but we had a great weekend ourselves. And so we're glad to be here today talking about one of the things that we all lost a little bit of over the weekend. I thought it would be a great night to go back and talk about sleep. So one of the things that we have, one of the books, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, is a book that we've done a book review on the show in the past. And so I was thinking, everybody was kind of a little tired today and dragging, and with the time change, it kind of messes us up. And I just thought, hey, maybe we ought to just review sleep a little bit. We talk about that tonight. So that's what's on the agenda for this evening, is to talk about some sleep patterns, see what's going on with us, see what happens to us when we don't sleep well. So we'll talk about that. Usually our Monday night show is Take Health to Church, and I had a little disruption in my weekend from my normal routine, and so I didn't get to make it to church yesterday morning, um, and I was preoccupied with some things that were outside of my control, and so that was we didn't do that yesterday. So maybe I can get caught up here before the week is over, and we'll take health to church maybe on a different night than Monday night for all you guys that listen for that particular show. Um, I'm sorry about that, but we missed it. So we'll try to make up for it as we go on um, in the week. So before we get into sleep, I wanted to talk about a supplement that you might not know much about or might not think much about. But whenever you're having soft tissue changes, like in the office, for all you guys that are starting and I've had several new patients over the last couple of weeks that have talked about, oh, I didn't know you had a show. And even some patients that weren't new talked about didn't know you had a show. So we're getting some people that watch the show that may not be familiar with what we do in the office, or it might be a good opportunity for you to learn something, or if you guys just want to know something, about just about what we do. So, but it's a Ligaplex, and you guys may not have heard of Ligaplex before. It's just got a bunch of stuff in it that is good for soft tissue and ligament type repair and restoration. So it's. I mean, anytime you deal with standard process, so standard process, the company, you guys have heard me talk about it before, but Standard Process is a company that's been around a long time, and they do a great job with their supplements. They have a lot of them. We take a lot of them personally in our house. We have a lot of them here for our patients in the office, and so um, I'm a big fan of Standard Process. But one of the things, and I'll just read some of the things that Ligaplex does for us, but Ligaplex contains nutrients that provide bone and joint support in a capsule supplement, supports the body's normal synthesis process of connective tissue cartilage, supports healthy joints, supports bone growth and the synthesis of cartilage, contains a combination of key ingredients from manganese, B12, cataplex, E, um, Ostropin PMG. We talked about the PMGs once before. Remember, they're kind of like the decoy, the flare that you send out when you, like, two jets, or like you watch Top Gun or something, and you got two jets facing off against each other, and the one jet fires the missile, and then the jet in front sends out a flare to try to like get the missile to go off into another direction. That's what the PMGs are about right there. And so this one has to do with um, this Ostropin PMG that's with bone. And then Cataplex ACP is a supplement that mixes multiple vitamins right there. So excellent source of B12 and manganese. And I mean, it's bovine bone, calcium lactate, organic pea vine juice powder, organic oat flour, bovine liver, veal bone PMG extract, bovine kidney. I mean, it's just got a bunch of stuff that's in it that is not your normal. what you would normally think about eating necessarily. But I thought that I might try to just to spend a minute at the beginning of each one of these shows and just talk a little bit about some of these supplements so that you might know that they're here, and you might, if you want them, you can always go to the rock.standardprocess.com, and you can get you can order any of our standard process supplements on that page. They'll ship them right straight to you. And so you can do that if you want to, but you can always come by the office too if you're in Lubbock, or if you'll let us know, we'll send you some. Um, but yeah, Ligaplex. Ligaplex is anytime we're trying to change bone and joint structure, and we're trying to change or do curve correction, is one of the things that we use it for. So someone's got a bad cervical curve, they've lost their cervical curve, and now we're trying to restore that cervical curve. We always talk about on the show, from our good friend Dr. Fraley, we always talk about fuel and activation. Those two things are things that we really need in order to get to functioning properly. Fuel and activation. So you got to make sure that you get the proper fuel in the body in order for the body to function properly. I had one of my ladies tell me today, she's like, when I sit around for too long, when I get up, I'm really stiff. What's that about? And um, I was like, well, how's your diet? That why would I ask that? Well, I asked that because that's there you go. Like, if you're stiff when you've been sitting around for too long, then you most likely have some connective tissue issues, or you most likely have some inflammation that's going on in your body. And so the anti-inflammatory diet is super important. High omega 3s, low omega 6s, those type of things are important for those type of situations. But fuel and activation is what we're really talking about right there. So you need that fuel, um, the fuel in order for your body to function the way it's supposed to, and you also need the activation. You got to be able to get your body to move properly so that it will function like it's supposed to. So that's a Ligaplex, Ligaplex, Ligaplex 1, and comes in a bottle. It's got 150 capsules, and serving size is 2 capsules. So there's 75 in a bottle. So that's over 2 months worth, 36, 2.5 months worth, and a bottle costs $35. So it's relatively cheap per month, and it's great for your connective tissue. And anytime we're making those changes, Ligaplex is something that you might consider. So that's all I wanted to talk about on that. An article that we were looking at last week, we were talking about resolvins, and we'd gone through a couple of them, but I just wanted to touch on this one more time before we got too far off of that. Is I wanted to touch on the idea that the neurochemically diverse intermediate nucleus of the medulla as a source of excitatory and inhibitory synaptic input to the nucleus tractus solitari. I know, I laugh when I read those titles like that. Like, you got to be kind of a nerd to study this type of stuff. And this comes from the Journal of Neuroscience, August 2007. But it's the part I wanted to read to you. Reflex changes in autonomic variables after neck muscle spindle afferent activation. Reflex changes in cardiorespiratory variables during body movements rely on interconnections between the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. I'll just read that to you again. Reflex changes in the cardiorespiratory variables during body movements rely on interactions between the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. A prime example of such interaction is the somatosympathetic reflex, in which stimulation of thinly myelinated group 3 and unmyelinated group 4 limb muscle afferent fibers can reflexively increase cardiorespiratory outputs. I know that's a lot of fancy words that are kind of confusing, but what it's basically saying is that particular reflex stimulates these very small blood vessels, and it changes cardiorespiratory output based on the way that your body is functioning, and so in your autonomic nervous system, your somatic and autonomic nervous system, and the somatic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that just fires to the muscle. It's just an all or nothing type of firing pattern. It's just brain to muscle. That's somatic. If you want to pick something up, if you want to move something, if you want to grasp something, bam, just somatic nervous system. But you have to have enough autonomics on there to make it work as well. And so the autonomics is what's going to it's going to bring more blood supply to the area. It's going to speed things up, slow things down, and smooth muscles, organs, and glands that are controlled by that. And so why does that matter? Well, the next article, results of this study suggest that that there's affected regional cerebral glucose metabolism related to sympathetic relaxation. Um, it's the name of the title of the article is Cerebral Metabolic Changes in Men After Chiropractic Spinal Manipulation for Neck Pain. And it's basically saying that there's a change in the muscle tone after an adjustment, and there's sympathetic relaxation and that has a lot to do. Remember, because what we were talking about last week were vagus nerve and respiratory, heart output, and pancreas stuff. When the right vagus nerve was getting involved, you could actually have type 2 diabetes because of it. But I wanted to read those. I didn't do a very good job reading them, but I wanted to read them just to talk about them so that you do understand that getting adjusted affects your nervous system. That's what you get adjusted for. That's what a chiropractic adjustment is doing. It's affecting your nervous system. It's getting your nervous system to either increase its function or decrease its function. And a lot of times, it's what we're really trying to do is decrease the function, calm things down. We don't need to stimulate things more. We need to calm things down. And that's what happens when you get an upper cervical or a cervical adjustment is you get a stimulation of the parasympathetic activity and the rest and recover activity. And that's what also goes along with your immune system. And I got a bunch of people in here today that are sick and coughing and not feeling well and all that sort of thing, right? And one of the patients that's new to us, she came here because she has been sick and she can't seem to get well. And someone said, "Well, have you tried a chiropractor?" And so she ended up in our office. And so you wouldn't think that that's something that's all that. If you didn't understand what we were doing, then you might not understand at all why someone would do that. Why would you come in the office because you've been sick and you can't get over this sickness? Why would it matter for you to come see a chiropractor? And do I treat the sickness? No, I don't treat the sickness. I don't treat the disease. I don't treat the symptoms. That's not the point. I'm trying to just make sure that the nervous system is functioning properly, and the nervous system has a big effect on the way that the brain functions, and it has a big effect on the way that we function on a daily basis. And when I had another conversation today with a lady, and I pointed out to her that you didn't have back problems until you had brain problems. Because I was doing a bunch of brain work on her, and she was like, "What is it that you're doing? Why do you have this tuning fork on my fingertips? Or what is it you're doing with my eyes right here? Why are you doing that?" And I said, "I'm trying to get your brain to work better." And she's like, "Well," she didn't say it, but it was kind of implied. It's like why? What does that have to do with my low back? Like, why do my back and my hip are hurting? And I'm like, "Yeah, but your back and your hip didn't start hurting until after your brain quit working properly." And it was really, really funny because we were talking and I had put a heel lift in her right shoe. And when we were talking during that whole conversation, and I was trying to get her to understand that her brain wasn't functioning the way that it really should be functioning, that there were some problems with the way that her brain was firing, which is always going to cause. No, that's not true. Which is never going to resolve your low back problems if you don't get your brain to function properly. You may for a very short period of time you may make them a little bit better, but in the long run, you're not going to solve that problem at all if you don't get your brain to function better. Your low back, and she also has a knee replacement. And the knee replacement, I'm like, look, why'd your knee wear out? Well, I don't know, it just wore out. I guess I was getting old. How's your other knee doing? My other knee's fine. How old is your other knee? Right? How if your left knee was replaced and your right knee is fine, then the left knee problem wasn't due to age, right? We don't think about that sometimes, but that's factual. Your right knee problem, you don't have a right knee problem. Your left knee problem got replaced. Why? Well, something wasn't working right. Okay, map that out. Back it up. Tell me what wasn't working right. Well, my knee joint wore out because the joint space was too thin on the inside. Well, how come? Well, because my foot went into pronation and turned in, and I walked on the inside of my foot, and that changed the inside of my knee. Okay, that's totally fine. Why'd your foot go into pronation? Well, I don't know. The muscles on the inside of my leg that hold my foot up, my tibialis muscles that help me with my arch, maybe they failed. Okay, why they fail on your left foot but not on your right foot? Well, I don't know. Well, maybe we should map that back and just keep it going. And well, a lot of times, what you'll find out is that side of the brain quit working first. So that right side of the brain was so busy fighting tigers that it got exhausted, so that it quit working. So we lost motor efferent information that's going to the muscles. We're losing muscle input from that side of the brain to the muscles that are around the knee, the hip, knee, and ankle. And now the hip, knee, and ankle have started to malfunction, and then we get some sort of joint orthopedic problem down the road because of that abnormal movement in that joint over a period of time. It wears out. Now our knee doesn't work. Now we got to get a knee replacement, and we could have, and no one ever told us that. You got to be kidding me. Like, that actually could have started from my brain. And the answer to that question is yes. It very well could have started from the brain. And so, and that bars injury, right? But if you look at the brain, you can solve a lot of problems for people. And when you get adjusted, you're working on the brain. That's the part. That's the part that I just really wanted to touch on to make sure that you understand that. Like, what? Why is he adjusting me? I don't understand why. Like, my ankle hurts. And another conversation I had today was about AMIT that we do, and which is really popular in Lubbock. There's a lot of AMIT doctors here due to the success rate that they've seen on people that have had AMIT done to them, and that AMIT from that we all learned, like, solves ankle problems in really short periods of time. Like, if you sprain your ankle, you can get AMIT done, turn your muscles back on, get back on your feet, start walking, and it's amazing how quickly that you can respond from that. So, lots of cool stuff. Lots of cool stuff at the Rock. Lots of cool stuff going on. So, all right. So we lost an hour this weekend, right? And you'd think that wouldn't be any big deal. And I was actually watching it when it happened, because, yeah. So I was awake at 1:57, and I was thinking to myself this weekend. I was like, at 1:57, I wonder if it's going to turn in 3 minutes. I wonder if it's going to turn 2 o'clock or it's going to turn 3 o'clock. And so I sat there and I just kept tapping my phone. I just kept tapping my phone just to see what was going on. So it went from 1:57 to 1:58, and then I was watching it to go 1:59, and then all of a sudden 3 o'clock. It was like it went from 1:59 to 3 o'clock all in 1 second, because we set the clocks forward, and yeah, right. So we lost an hour of sleep. And so now our we have disruption in sleep. And Matthew Walker does a great job. If you guys haven't read this book, it's a great book. And if you want to, it's called Why We Sleep: Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. We did a whole show on it back in September, I think, about this book. But one of the things I learned from Matthew Walker was about sleep pressure, and that there's actually some chemicals that are involved in sleep pressure. And so, and he says, he goes in there to explain your 24-hour circadian rhythm is the first of the two factors determining wake and sleep. The second is sleep pressure. At this very moment, a chemical called adenosine is building up in your brain. It will continue to increase in concentration with every waking minute that elapses. The longer you are awake, the more adenosine will accumulate. Think of adenosine as a chemical barometer that continuously registers the amount of elapsed time since you woke up this morning. One consequence of increasing adenosine in the brain is an increased desire to sleep. This is known as sleep pressure and is the second force that will determine when you feel sleepy, and thus you should go to bed. Using a clever dual action effect, the high concentration of adenosine simultaneously turns down the volume of wake promoting regions in the brain and turn up the dial on sleep inducing regions. As a result of that chemical sleep pressure, when adenosine concentrations peak, an irresistible urge for slumber will take hold. It happens to most people after 12 to 16 hours of being awake. So, what he's trying to say to us is that there's actually a chemical that causes us to get sleepy. And I said that this weekend. I'm sleepy. I'm not tired. And I have kind of had that defined in my head as two different things. You could be really sleepy, or you could be tired. And the sleep pressure is actually a chemical thing. So it starts from the morning, and it starts building up and starts building up and starts building up and it starts building up, and it just goes throughout the day, right? That increase of adenosine goes throughout the day, and then finally it's going to finally reach that threshold where it's so high, and it's turning off the areas in the brain that are it's simultaneously turning down the volume of wake promoting regions in the brain and turning up the dial on sleep inducing regions. So the parts of your brain that would make you wake up are getting turned down, and the parts of your brain that would make you um, go to sleep are getting turned up. And so that's what happens. It happens to most people after 12 to 16 hours of being awake. So what happened to us in the middle of the night, and it messed up our whole clock, right? Our whole circadian rhythm, right? So, but we lost that hour. So what our body was used to doing as getting that whole chemical thing reset, when we get into that sleep pattern, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, we're used to getting up at a certain time, and then all of a sudden we've lost that hour. So we went to bed at, you know, I mean, I don't have to explain it. I think everybody pretty much understands it. If you go to bed at 10 o'clock and you get up at 6, then your body has had 8 hours of sleep. Well, if you get up at 10, if you go to bed at 10 o'clock and then they change the time and you get up at 6, you didn't really get up at 6. As far as your body's concerned, you got up at 5. And that changed the way that changed the whole sleep thing. So what did a lot of us do? A lot of us went for coffee, right? We just like, man, we're so tired. We stayed up all night. Man, I got to have some coffee. So let's talk about that for just a second. You can, however, artificially mute the sleep signal of adenosine by using a chemical that makes you feel more alert and awake: caffeine. Caffeine is not a food supplement. Rather, caffeine is the most widely used and abused psychoactive stimulant in the world. It is the second most traded commodity on the planet after oil. The consumption of caffeine represents one of the longest and largest unsupervised drug studies ever conducted on the human race, perhaps rivaled only by alcohol, and it continues to this day. Caffeine works by successfully battling with adenosine for the privilege of latching onto adenosine welcome sites or receptors in the brain. Once the caffeine occupies this receptor, however, it does not stimulate them like adenosine, making you sleepy. Rather, caffeine blocks and effectively inactivates the receptor, acting as a masking agent. It's the equivalent of sticking your fingers in your ears to shut out sound. By hijacking and occupying these receptors, caffeine blocks the sleepiness signal normally communicated to the brain by adenosine that would otherwise seduce you into sleep. So it's a chemical thing that's going on, and we know that. We don't. I don't think we necessarily can break it down to understand that. But when we get back from on the second half, maybe we'll try to break that down. So you guys stick around with us. We'll be right back right after these messages. I know this is awkward with this new microphone. I hope everybody out there can hear me talking. Um, I've got some feedback today that maybe we need a little bit better sound system. And so we use this microphone for the first several months of the show. And I'm just trying it out tonight. I'll go back and listen to it later and see if you guys can hear me. I hope you can. It seems like it's going through the radio station okay, that they can hear us. So I think I've got it. It may be handy. It's just a little awkward. It kind of blocks my view. I can't really see what's going on some of this stuff over here, or I have to kind of work around it. But it appears to me that it's working. It appears like everybody's getting sound out there. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, uh, this Saturday was kind of an amazing day for Texas Tech athletics and for Texas Tech University. You guys out there that don't follow Tech athletics, um, they won a baseball game against Texas on Saturday, and then they beat number 11 Baylor in basketball, and then at the same time all that was happening, the track team, the Texas Tech track team, they became the indoor national champions. So they won the national championship in indoor track and field. I don't even know if it's field, but um, that's kind of an awesome day for Texas Tech, to see all those people. And if in Lubbock, it was a big deal because we had the baseball game going on against Texas, and then we had the basketball game going on against Baylor, and there was pretty much sellouts on both of those games. So, and they were back to back. So it's quite amazing to see the support that people are giving Texas Tech athletics and the product that's being put out there for everybody to watch. It's pretty impressive. So kudos to those guys. Good job, you guys. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Jason Clemmons. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and we're getting into why we sleep. Some thoughts, some overview thoughts of things since we had um, since we had the time change this weekend, and I know everybody's dragging just a little bit. At least most people were that were coming by the office today. Everybody was just a little bit tired, right? And so, but we're talking about adenosine and how it rises throughout the day, but then caffeine comes and hijacks the adenosine receptor in the brain, and then the caffeine blocks the mechanism and stops the process, and so you feel a little bit um, less tired because of the circulating caffeine. But here's kind of the problem with that. Levels of circulating caffeine peak approximately 30 minutes after oral administration. What is problematic, though, is the persistence of caffeine in your system. In pharmacology, we use the term half life. This is Matthew Walker talking. In pharmacology, we use the term half life when discussing a drug's efficacy. This simply refers to the length of time it takes for the body to remove 50% of a drug's concentration. So if you have 100 grams, how much time does it take to get you down to 50 grams? Caffeine has an average half life of 5 to 7 hours. Let's say that you have a cup of coffee after your evening dinner around 7:30 p.m. This means that by 1:30 a.m., 50% of the caffeine will still be active and circulating throughout your brain tissue. In other words, by 1:30 a.m., you're only halfway to completing the job of cleansing your brain of the caffeine you drank after dinner. There's nothing benign about that 50% mark either. Half a shot of caffeine is still plenty powerful, and much more decomposition work lies ahead throughout the night before the caffeine can disappear. Sleep will not come easily or be smooth throughout the night as your brain continues its battle against the opposing force of caffeine. And some of you might say to yourselves, some of you might say, it doesn't really affect me that way anymore. Caffeine doesn't really affect me. Well, then what you've got going on, if you can drink a cup of coffee at after supper and you can go straight to sleep and you don't have any disruption whatsoever, then your body has lost its ability. It's adapted to that coffee, and now you're losing your neurological response to a stimulant. And you can be, that's what we call being blocked, or there's another thing that could be called is being switched. And so blocked and switched are terms that we use, especially when we're dealing with the heart rate variability and whether or not your sympathetic and parasympathetic activities are working properly. So the heart rate variability is going to give us some data about what is going on with your heart rate variability, with your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. And so it's a way of measuring, and you guys know this, but it's a way of measuring how your body is functioning in a way that gives you some feedback to say, hey, look, there's some things going on that you might not understand. And just like always, when we are talking, all these things tie in back together. And so if you're blocked or switched, being blocked means that you're not responding to the stimulant in the way that your body is supposed to start. Like a person that's blocked, if they were threatened, if they had some sort of fight or flight response, let's say an intruder broke into the house, or you were going for a walk and all of a sudden a pack of dogs started to attack you, and you had no fight or flight response whatsoever. You were just like, you just like chill. You didn't have any response. That would be kind of an example of being blocked. But being switched is kind of a different mechanism. It's where you basically do the opposite of what you're supposed to do. So if you if you were taking you know some sort of medication or something that's supposed to put you to sleep, but it kept you up all night long, that would be considered like being switched, right? In our world, we don't take medication, but something like caffeine should keep you up, but instead it just puts you to sleep. It had the opposite effect of what was going on. We use it a lot in the autonomic nervous system when you're laying down and you get up. What we should see is if you're laying on your back and you set up, that's going to cause your body to have what's called a sympathetic response, and the sympathetic response is going to increase. It's going to increase your heart rate. It's going to cause you're going to get this sympathetic response. You're going to increase in heart rate. Well, you'll also get a decrease in parasympathetic response, which both of those things will give you an increase in heart rate. Being switched would mean that you would go the other direction, like you stand up and your heart rate goes down. That's not supposed to happen. That's the opposite direction, and that happens. We check that a lot. You'd be super surprised. A lot of you have a pulse ox machine that you can put on your finger, and you can get how much oxygen and you've got and what your heart rate is. Right? You should try that sometimes. You should put that pulse ox on and just sit down and get really calm and just look and see what your heart rate is, and then stand up, and you should get about 10 beats per minute change right there in your heart rate. So if you're not getting that, you could be blocked. Like your body's not responding to that. And that happens more times than you think, because we measure that on our new patients a lot. I mean, pretty much all of our new patients. We have them sit there, we take their heart rate, and then we have them stand up. And I'm looking for about that, 10, maybe 10 to 15 heartbeat range. I'm definitely not looking for it to drop, and I'm definitely not looking for it to stay flat, because if it stays flat, what it's telling me is that your sympathetic nervous system isn't responding. So you may be in a state like, what's going on with your adrenal glands? What's going on with your brain? Are you exhausted from fighting the tiger? Or is there too much exhaustion that's going on? Those things like that are things that you really would benefit from someone kind of measuring for you and determining whether or not uh, that's what's happening to you, right? So there's your caffeine. So if you're having to drive yourself, you're having to keep yourself awake, and you want to use caffeine, that's what caffeine is doing for you. It is pushing on that receptor and keeping that pressure, that sleep pressure down. Um, Caffeine, which is not only prevalent in coffee, certain teas, and many energy drinks, but also foods such as dark chocolate and ice cream, as well as drugs such as weight loss pills and pain relievers, is a common culprit that keeps people from falling asleep easily and soundly thereafter, typically masquerading as insomnia, an actual medical condition. Also, be aware that decaffeinated does not mean non caffeinated. That's an important point. Depending on the decaffeination method and the beans used, 1 cup of decaf can have between 3 to as high as 10% of the dose of a regular cup of coffee. The jolt of caffeine does wear off. Caffeine is removed from your system by an enzyme within your liver, which gradually degrades it over time. So that's a big deal. If you're trying to stay awake late into the night by drinking coffee, you should be prepared for a nasty consequence when your liver successfully evicts the caffeine from your system, a phenomenon commonly known as a caffeine crash. Like the batteries running down on a toy robot, your energy level plummets rapidly. You find it difficult to function and concentrate with a strong sense of sleeping once again. So we now understand why, for the entire time that caffeine is in your system, the sleepiness chemicals is blocked, the adenosine is blocked. Nevertheless, continues to build up. Your brain is not aware of this rising tide of sleep encouraging adenosine. However, because the wall of caffeine you've created is holding it back from your perception. So that's a really important point right there. Uh, but once your liver dismantles the barrier of caffeine, you feel a vicious backlash. You are hit with the sleepiness you had experienced 2 or 3 hours ago before you drank that cup of coffee, plus all the extra adenosine that's accumulated in the hours in between, impatiently waiting for caffeine to leave. That's a really big concept to understand, is that the sleep pressure is the adenosine, and that pressure is building up throughout the day that's making you sleepy. Then you block that with caffeine. You block the effect of the adenosine on the brain, but you don't get rid of the adenosine. You just block it for a short period of time. And then if your liver is working good, you will get rid of that coffee faster, and then you'll have that excess amount of adenosine on the other side of it that will drive you down and make you sleepy again. So um, that's what you probably like. I need another cup of coffee, right? You need to keep driving it down. Scientists exposed spiders to different drugs and then observed the webs that they constructed. Those drugs included LSD, speed, which is amphetamine, marijuana, and caffeine. The results, which speak for themselves, can be observed in this figure in the book. The researchers noted how strikingly incapable the spiders were in constructing anything resembling a normal or logical web that would be of any functional use when given caffeine, even relative to other potential drugs tested. So that you can't see it, but the web that they made with caffeine is not good at all. It is worth pointing out that caffeine is a stimulant drug. Caffeine is also the only addictive substance that we readily give to our children in teens, the consequences of which we will cover later in the book. So that's the first part that I wanted to talk about. The second part is I want to talk about how many hours of sleep we need and some of the issues that goes along with that. So on page 260 in Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, for you guys that are listening to the show and staying with us tonight, um, reflecting on these deathly consequences of long term chronic and short term acute sleep deprivation allows us to address a recent controversy in the field of sleep research, one that many a newspaper, not to mention some scientists, apprehended incorrectly. The study in question was conducted by researchers at the University of California in Los Angeles on the sleep habits of specific pre industrial tribes. Using wristwatch activity devices, the researchers tracked the sleep of three hunter gatherer tribes that are largely untouched by the way of industrial modernization. I don't even know this, a tribe in South America, this, the San Hadza tribe of Africa, which we have previously discussed, assessing sleep and wake times day after day across many months. The findings were thus: tribes people who averaged just 6 hours of sleep in the summer and about 7.2 hours of sleep in the winter. Well respected media outlets touted the findings as proof that human beings do not, after all, need a full 8 hours of sleep, some suggesting we can survive just fine on 6 hours or less. For example, the headline of one prominent U.S. newspaper read Sleep study on modern day hunter gatherers dispels notion that we're wired to need 8 hours a day. That's that. Well, man, we do this all the time. We grab a hold of something and we run with it, and we don't really understand what it means, and we incorporate it into our society, and we just make out like it's normal stuff. And what Matthew Walker, who studies sleep, is telling us is it's not true. Others started out with the already incorrect assumption that modern societies need only 7 hours of sleep, and then questioned whether we even need that much. Do we really need to sleep 7 hours a night? How can such prestigious and well-respected entities such as these conclusions, especially after the science that I have presented in this chapter? Let us carefully reevaluate the findings and see if we can arrive at the same conclusion. First, when you read the paper, you will learn that the tribespeople were actually giving themselves a 7 to 8.5 hour sleep opportunity each night. Moreover, the wristwatch device, which is neither a precise nor gold standard measurement of sleep, estimated a range of 6 to 7.5 hours of this time was spent asleep. The sleep opportunity that these tribespeople provided themselves is therefore almost identical to what the National Sleep Foundation and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend for all adult humans: 7 to 9 hours in bed. 7 to 9 hours of time in bed. The problem is that some people confuse time sleep with sleep opportunity. We know that many individuals in the modern world only give themselves 5 to 6 hours of sleep opportunity, which normally means they will only obtain around 4.5 to 6 hours of actual sleep. So if you're getting in bed, and say you're getting in bed at midnight, and you've got to get up at 6 in the morning, and the first time you got in bed was at midnight, you're only giving yourself 6 hours of sleep opportunity right there. Now it may take you 30 minutes to go to sleep or an hour to go to sleep. And so you might end up with five and a half, 5 hours of sleep when you have 6 hours of sleep opportunity. Um, The problem is that some people, yeah. Um, so no, the finding does not provide that the sleep of hunter-gatherer tribes is similar to ours in the post-industrial era. Unlike us, give themselves more sleep opportunity than we do. It's tough these days. We've got so many devices. We got so much technology that it forces us to be disciplined to turn that stuff off and go to sleep. And a lot of us aren't doing that at all. Second, let us assume that the wristwatch measurements were perfectly accurate and that these tribes obtained an annual average of just um, 6.75 hours of sleep. The next erroneous conclusion drawn from the findings was that humans must, therefore, naturally need a mere 6.75 hours of sleep and no more. Therein lies the rub, he says. If you refer back to the two newspaper headlines I quoted, you'll notice that both of the word need, but what need are we talking about? The incorrect presumption presup- is, presupposition was made this: whatever sleep the tribes people were obtaining is all that the human needs, is flawed reasoning on two counts. Need is not defined by which obtained. Need is not defined by that which is obtained, but rather what or not that amount of sleep is sufficient to accomplish all that sleep does. The most obvious need then would be for life, a healthy life. That's what I was trying to get to right there. The healthy life, it's not can you get by on a short amount of sleep? You can, but statistically, you're going to run into problems from a health standpoint if you're not getting the amount of sleep that you need. There's just, I mean, we all, it's, I think it's cool on days like this when because you can just ask yourself, have you been as sharp as you normally are? Have you been fussy today with anyone that you're normally not fussy with? Have you made some mistakes today that you wouldn't necessarily make? Have you been as motivated to thrive throughout the day? Right? And I think a lot of us, if we were really truthful with ourselves, we would answer those questions and say, no, I'm really not as awesome as I usually am. I'm a little dragging today. I'm a little tired today. And the sleep disruption, it has affected me. Well, there's the statistics, and I don't know if I'll get to the statistics in the book, but he does talk in the book in multiple areas um, about all of the the um, the statistics of like heart attacks that go up whenever we make a time change like this, like the depression or anxiety that goes up whenever we're in the lack of sleep. And I think it's always a good idea to learn from these moments because I think we can learn from these moments of having a lack of sleep that will help us for the rest of the days of the year. Like if you were wondering whether or not sleep is important, well, just deprive yourself of sleep and then ask yourself, are you functioning well? I think it's really happening a lot with our kids. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I ever made with raising my children is giving them a cell phone and letting them have that cell phone at night. Now, the society, the group, those kids, they stay up late on those phones and they're up early on those phones, and so that was a huge mistake that I made with both my kids and of letting them have their phones and letting them have them all night long, and because I made their health, I made I created an environment inside my own house that made them less healthy, and that was irresponsible of me as a parent to set something up like that and make that happen. I didn't give them the opportunity to get sleep that they or at least sleep opportunity, right? I didn't do that because I didn't make sure that they got rid of them. And the next chapter is iPads, factory whistles, and nightcaps. What's stopping you from sleeping? Many of us are beyond tired. Why? Well, what precisely about modernity, modern life, has so perverted our otherwise instinctual sleep patterns, eroded our freedom to sleep, and thwarted our ability to do so soundly across the night. For those of us who do not have a sleep disorder, the reason underlying this state of sleep deficiency can seem hard to pinpoint or seemingly clear or erroneous. Beyond longer commute times and sleep procrastination caused by late evening television and digital entertainment, both of which are not important in the top and tail snipping of our sleep time and that of our children. Five key factors that change how much and how well we sleep. Number one, constant electrical light as well as LED light. That's one of the things that causes us to lose sleep. Um, Regularized temperature. Is it cool enough in your room? Are you getting enough to make it? Caffeine, as discussed previously, alcohol, and a legacy of punching time cards. It is this set of societal engineering forces that are responsible for many of the individual mistaken beliefs that they are suffering from medical insomnia. You might get a diagnosis. We mentioned that over the last few weeks. You might get a diagnosis of something, and there's so many. You'll end up with a drug. You'll get a diagnosis of insomnia. You'll end up with some sort of drug, and then it's not because of that. It's because of one of these five things right here. And um, he goes back to at 255 257 Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan, not far from Brooklyn Bridge, is the site of arguably the most assuming yet seismic shift in our human history. Here, Thomas Edison built the first power generating station to support an electrified society. For the first time in the human race had truly scalable method of unbuckling itself from our planet's natural 24-hour cycle of light and dark. Before we had electricity, we would go to sleep when it was dark. At least create that sleep opportunity when it was dark. And then we would end up, um, we wouldn't wake up until it got light. So those two things happened. That set our circadian rhythm, that set our clock, that kicked off the adenosine. We used to go to sleep when it was dark, and we get up when it's light. Then we created electricity. We changed the world. Now we've created clock time, and we've changed the world even more. And so we've really messed up our sleep. So we got just a minute left. What can we do? What are some of the things we can do? Right? We can just, number one, be educated that there's disruption in our sleep, and that when there's disruption in our sleep, there's disruption in our health. That's number one. Number two, we can set our why to say, hey, look, it's very important for me to get sleep. Those two things are very important. So we want to make sure we're getting enough sleep, because it's important for us to get that sleep. And then we can start breaking down some of the factors. Ease up on the caffeine at night, really after about 2 o'clock. Ease up on the caffeine if you want to get some good sleep. Make sure that your room temperature is nice and cool. Make sure that you get your eyes off of light, get them away from light. That would be one thing that would be very helpful. And then and and then make sure that you give yourself a good sleep opportunity of 7 to 9 hours so that you can get the exact sleep that you need. So that's the end of the show for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. Thought we'd talk about it since most of us are tired. I can't wait to go to bed myself. Probably get in early tonight. So you guys have a great evening. Hope you have a great day tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock with Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. You guys have a great night.